All right. Welcome to Michael's Record Collection. Today we'll be talking with Lee Abraham, who has recently released a new album called Harmony Synchronicity, and his eighth studio album. Lee, thanks for being with me today.
Yeah, hi Michael. Yeah, no worries. Good to see you. It's been a while. When was the last time we saw each other? Probably Rozfest 2007.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Far too long. I think yeah, when we were cheering you on with Galahad, when you were the bass player instead of the guitarist.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this album that you've put out, but firstly, I guess I would want to know what you put this together relatively quickly during the lockdown, as I understand it. What was there an impetus to just do something to stay busy during the lockdown or for the pandemic, or was this just a normal writing cycle for you?
Bit of a combination of the two, really. I'd done Comatose in 2019, the concept album, and I released that in September 2019. And do you know what? I was actually thinking about maybe doing some gigs on the back of that. So Prog magazine here in the UK did a short interview with me, and the journalist said, as they normally ask, any live dates? And I said, no, not really. And the journalist said to me, well, actually, as this is a concept album, you could actually, because you have got a band that help you out with doing the album. And I said, well, yeah, kind of. And they said, why don't you just do a festival date somewhere and just play the album and just like advertise it as the only UK date or the only Europe date or whatever it might be. And I started to think about that tail end of 2019, thinking, that might work. I could probably get into that. So I just started to put some serious thoughts around it when the lockdown hit here in the UK in March 2020. And I thought, right, okay, well, that's putting an end to that then. So I thought, and all gigs were cancelled, not only large festivals and music venues, but I do a lot of local gigging here near where I live in bars and pubs and things, just playing covers with local friends, and all that stopped as well. And I thought, well, what can I do then? And I thought, well, the only thing to do is to write another album. But I did think that it was a bit quick because I'd only done Comatose literally 6 months before, and I thought, well, it's probably a bit quick to. And I thought, well, all I can do is just write something and see what happens, the usual kind of thing that you do when you embark on these mad projects. Let's just start it and see where we end up. And and I wrote over an album's worth of material in about 8 weeks, which is unheard of for me normally. I never normally work that quickly. I've been thinking back to when I recorded Black and White, which was back in 2009. It took me ages and ages and ages to write that album, so much so I never thought that one was going to end up being written, but probably took about 2 years to write that album. But this one just kind of materialized over about 8 weeks. So, and it was literally due to the fact that there was nothing to do. I mean, it's exactly the same situation now. Here we are in February, I should say, 2021. And England the UK is back in full lockdown again. So there is literally nothing to do apart from stay at home. And obviously I've got a day job. I work from home, but I'm all set up to work from home for that. So, but apart from that, there's nothing to do. So I've literally just been spending my entire waking hours in this room, which is used to be my recording studio, and it's now my work day job room as well, my office, if you like. So bit of a combination, really, of bit of a long-winded answer there, Michael. Sorry about that, but it was a combination, really, of just having nothing to do but music, and the impetus to get another album out, I guess, because there was no option to do anything else.
So you wrote more than an album's worth of material. How did you sort of narrow down your focus on what you wanted to put on this album?
It's usually a process of working. I mean, I have this joint love of progressive rock and also sort of AOR heavy rock. So my writing tends to sort of span those two genres really, and so I usually end up writing some songs which are quite proggy, and then other songs which are quite, still rock music, but less so on the progressive front. So I usually just work out on all the proggy tracks and think, well, they're the ones that should make up a prog album. There's a lots of discussion and argument at the moment, especially with the release of Stephen Wilson's latest album, about what's prog and what isn't prog. But
Yeah.
I've got a very definite idea in my mind what I like to have on an album that I'm releasing as a prog album. So yeah.
Ultimately, it's probably a good thing that social media did not exist when Led Zeppelin made Led Zeppelin 3. Because bands kind of lose their minds when artists decide to change things up a little bit. So you mentioned your progressive rock love that you have. I think you came to that in like the late 90s. What were you listening to before then? What were your big bands that you were into before that?
I was a big fan of Sting, actually. So I liked the Police back in mid 80s, but of course then the Police stopped in the mid 80s, so yeah, I really kind of followed Sting's solo career, and I was a bass player primarily at that time as well. Of course, Sting's a bass player, and Sting was one of my favourite bass players, still is really. So yeah, I followed Sting quite a lot, and of course, in his own way, there's some kind of prog elements to Sting's music. He uses odd time signatures, and he puts complicated passages and all kinds of stuff in his music. So there was always a little bit of prog there. Who else did I listen to? I've always been a massive fan of Queensryche and bands like Iron Maiden. But that kind of spans from my childhood really, and just kind of lingered on into my teens and my early 20s until prog came along really.
So you have this this album it's pretty much, other than your drummer, it's all the music is you. You do the keyboards, the bass guitar, the acoustic guitar, the electric guitar, but you, since like your second album, you have brought in guests to sing on your albums. Do you not like your voice, or do you not feel confident in your voice, or what? What's the decision making there?
Yeah, a bit of both really. I don't think I've got a particularly nice sounding singing voice. I can just about hold a tune, I can just about sing in tune. But I just don't think my voice is very interesting or nice to listen to really when I'm singing. So there are people out there who've got far better tones to their voices, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and obviously, I can labor away at singing until it's right, till it's perfectly in tune and perfectly in time, and every inflection is just how I want it, if I was to sing it myself. But then at the end of the day, I'd still listen back to it and think, it might be technically perfect, or technically right, I should say. Perfect's probably a bit big-headed. It's technically right, but it still sounds a bit uninteresting. So I tend to go for singers who've got, to my ear anyway, really interesting and nice sounding voices. Yeah.
So with 7 songs, you have 1 instrumental, and you have 5 different singers for the 6 songs with vocals. What goes into choosing the singers for your songs? Is there anybody else that you wanted to work with that maybe wasn't available for this album?
No, there wasn't anybody who said no, which is nice. I usually get yes. I'm quite lucky actually. I usually get yeses from everybody that I ask, which is nice. And I tend to these days I can usually pretty much write when I write the song and the melodies. I've pretty much got a singer in mind. So someone like Mark Atkinson, for instance, who I've used an awful lot over the last 3 or 4 albums, his voice is quite a fantastic voice to listen to. He's got great tone, but he's very much a lower register singer. He can't sing very high, and that's purely just because of his range. And so when I've written songs in the past and the melodies that I'm writing tend to come out in the lower register, I automatically think Mark would be great for this song, you know, because it's right in that register for him. It might be the kind of tempo that he's used to singing. And opposed to that, you know, if it's a more rockier song that needs a bit more of a, you know, a bit more of a David Coverdale type delivery or something, you know, then obviously I would think, well, that's obviously not Mark at all, you know, and I'd think about somebody else, you know, like maybe Dec Burke and I've used Peter Jones on the last album, actually. I don't know how familiar US audiences are with Peter, but fantastic singer, really good. He's really got that smooth sort of, I hate to say 80s kind of delivery, but, you know, there's a song called Stay on the new album, which is very much a kind of a Phil Collins type Genesis type feel to the song. And I thought that Peter would be ideal for that, because Peter does a brilliant sort of almost like a pastiche of that kind of era. And his voice is just so suited to it. And I sent him the song, and luckily he said yes, as everybody else did.
I have to admit, I wasn't terribly aware of him, and I was very taken with his vocal performance. I thought he did a great job on the song.
Yeah.
You finally incorporated Stu Nicholson into one of your solo albums,
Yep.
but Stu's vocal on the opening track is definitely less theatrical and dramatic than what we get in Galahad. Was that intentional?
I don't know really. I mean, you know, the way I do these things is that I you know, demo the vocals. I mean, the music that gets sent out to the singers is what you hear on the album, because, you know, I'm just recording. I got all my gear permanently set up, so it's not like some musicians who I know don't have their gear permanently set up, where they might just do a scratch demo on a guitar or whatever. You know, when I'm writing and forming these songs, I'm actually recording the guitar parts, and I'm recording the piano parts, I'm recording the bass parts, and everything goes down almost straight away. So that gets sent off to Gerald, who does the drums. He's fully set up with his own studio and records drums at home. And he then sends me the drums back through, and I mix them in, and then it goes off to the guys who are doing the vocals, and they get the finished product with my really bad demo vocal over the top. So I've written the melodies of what I want them to sing, and most of the time, I mean, I'm happy with whether a singer deviates slightly or not, or sticks completely 100% to what I've done. I don't mind either way. I'm just usually happy to get, you know, really good vocals back. So, and I think Stu, he just stuck completely slavishly to what I'd done on the demo. And he, you know, because he said to me, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, do whatever you like, but feel comfortable with doing, you know, whatever you want." And I think with Stu, it was a combination of he just wanted to make sure that he did a good job for me, which was really nice. So he stuck slavishly to my demo and just sung exactly what I sung on the demo vocal. And also the second thing about Stu is that, of course, we were in lockdown, so everybody was doing everything remotely. He was recording at home, and he'd never recorded himself professionally, vocal-wise, at home on his own. So he'd set himself up with a Pro Tools recording system, and it was more or less the first time that he'd used it alone. You know, he'd always had other people around him before when he'd recorded before, whether it be, you know, Carl grew him at the studio to record him for the albums, or, you know, even Dean, the keyboard player from Galahad, he would go around to Stu's house if they wanted to record stuff at Stu's house before. But of course, Dean couldn't do that. So he was and I couldn't go around. I only live about 30 miles away from Stu, so I could have easily gone to him. But, you know, can't do that at the moment. So he was recording completely on his own.
So tell me a little bit about the recording of this. You know, you mentioned your home studio. Was all of this recorded in that room where you are right now?
Yeah, well, everything apart from the vocals and the drums. Yeah. Yeah.
So your recording studio space. Tell me a little bit about the equipment you used, first of all.
So everything's based in an Apple iMac, which is it's getting on a bit now. Actually, I bought it it was brand new in 2013, so it's 8 years old, but it's still going well. And that's loaded with Pro Tools. I've got the latest version of Pro Tools 2020, and I've got a Focusrite interface, which is then fed the audio out to a couple of Adam monitors. And for recording guitar, I mean, I've got a selection of guitars. I've got electric guitars, acoustic guitars, bass guitars, and all kinds of stuff. With regards to recording the guitar sounds, as with any guitarist, I'm never happy. So I'm always changing. So sometimes I'm using a software plugin for guitar sounds. Sometimes I'm using a multi-effects unit, like there's a company called Line 6 who do one called the Helix. I've got one of those. That's what I use when I play live, actually. So I might use the Helix. Other times I've recently bought myself an actual proper valve pedal. Actually, I'm not a great fan of guitar amps, I have to say. I have had amps in the past. I've had valve amps and solid state amps, digital amps. I've had the lot, really. But more and more these days, when you play live, and if you play live in a fairly small venue, you're constantly being told to turn the volume down. So, and we all know, of course, that valve amps always sound better when they're cranked, and you just can't do that anymore. So, I've tended to move away from amps and moved more towards a sort of, I mean, amp modelers like the Helix are getting so good these days, and if you play with them a little bit, they don't necessarily sound great out of the box. You have to play with them a little bit to carve out your sound, as it were. So I use a combination of things for recording guitars. When it comes to acoustic guitars, I still do the traditional method of setting up my condenser microphone and sitting here and actually recording the acoustic guitar into the condenser microphone. So that's still the old school method. Bass guitar goes straight into the interface and just record that direct. Don't use any bass amps or anything like that. And as for keyboards, I've got a tiny, you just won't believe it really, I've got a tiny, it's about 2 octaves, I think, I can just see it over there. It's about 2 octave keyboard, only because I wanted something small for my desktop. I have got a bigger one, but and I just use pianos and synths and keyboards and things that are software driven in Pro Tools. So Pro Tools comes with a great grand piano, it comes with a great Hammond organ, it comes with great string sounds and all the things that you use in prog and mainstream rock music. Really, the only thing it hasn't got is a decent mellotron. So I had to go out and buy a third-party plugin for a mellotron. But apart from that, it's all in there. So yeah, it's a fairly simple setup, really.
Do you have where you would have in a traditional recording studio, you would have an engineer to bounce ideas off of, or to tell you when something maybe isn't working the way you kind of think it's working? Is there somebody that acts as your sort of ears and kind of keeps you in check and keeps you honest and says, no, Lee, don't do it that way, do it another way? Is there a person like that, or is it just the way you want it all the time?
I have to be honest, it is more or less the way I want it all the time. But having said that, sometimes when I send things to Mully, my drummer, he will say, oh, so what's happening there? If there's a bit in the song that I've left, either without a guitar solo or without a vocal or something, he might say, well, what's happening there then? And I might say to him, oh yeah, I haven't really thought about what to do there. And sometimes he comes up with a suggestion, and he might say, well, what you ought to do is maybe put a piano part in there or something, or but this is very, very occasionally. Doesn't happen very often. I think probably out of, how many albums have I done now? Maybe, you said earlier it's 8 or 9, something like that.
8 of them.
He's probably done that. Mully's probably done that maybe 4 or 5 times out of all those albums. Not even enough to get a writing credit, the poor chap.
Oh no. So the opener is "The World Is Falling Down." I'm curious as to if did you go into this with not a concept per se, but like did you have like some theme or some group of ideas that you wanted the album to track through as you wrote?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the lyrics on the album are, of course, about the pandemic and about the lockdowns that everybody has suffered. And I'd had a particularly bad day, I think, when I wrote The World Is Falling Down. I'd come back from, I think I'm a keen, since lockdowns, I've become a keen cyclist. So I'm out on my bike quite a lot. And I'd just come back from somewhere, and I think I'd seen something that I didn't quite like. And it was something, you know, how sometimes you see people behaving in a stupid way and you just think you shouldn't be doing that. And just little things that kind of annoy you, really. And I came home and I spoke to my wife and I just said, do you know what? There's people down there and they're doing so and so. It's the typical kind of grumpy old man thing, you know. I find myself doing this more and more. I just think, why do people have to behave like that? You know, there's just absolutely no call for it. And we're in the middle of this pandemic. It makes things even worse. Da, 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 da. And I came upstairs and wrote the lyrics for The World Is Falling Down almost instantly. So so that was a kind of an outlet, really, for that particular bad day that I'd had. But you know, just the rest of the lyrics. There's a song on the album called "Hearing the Call" as well, and that's very much about, you know, the fact that there's lots of people who are willing to give their opinions about how things are going, and you know, lots of armchair critics. You know, they're just willing to sit at home and just spout on Facebook about, well, of course the government's doing this wrong, the government's doing that wrong, the government's doing that wrong. And sometimes I agree with people, but I mean, I've worked in my day job a lot in politics, so I tend to understand how politicians work and things. But sometimes I just think, hang on a minute, what, you know, if they're getting it so wrong and you think you could get it so right, why don't you have a go at actually standing for office and, you know, going in there and sorting it out? If you think they're doing it so wrong, just don't sit around and complain about it. Go out there and hear, you know, if there's a calling for you, go out and answer it, you know?
Right.
So that was that one.
So Hearing the Call is probably, I guess, the one that prog fans will identify immediately. They'll look at the time, you know, the time of the track, and say, okay, it's about 12 minutes long. Yeah,
that's the long one. Yeah.
That's the long one. That's the prog centerpiece. But I find that this album overall is not a really heavy progressive album. I think there's some elements that I've heard that sound a little bit like U2. I think I've heard some Strawberry Fields-esque keyboards in Rise Again. You know, what were you kind of listening to musically while you were making this album that kind of influenced you?
I don't think anything in particular, really. I mean, I'm always open to listening to new music. And I have found myself over the last couple of years listening to probably more straight ahead rock and AOR music than I have prog. You know, there's still the staple ones that I go to, like Dream Theater. I'll always follow Dream Theater. Every album that Dream Theater does, I'll always, you know, get it and listen to it and you know, soak up all the Petrucci genius that's within. But I was, yeah, I've been listening to a lot of AOR. There's a lot of AOR bands around at the moment, especially from sort of Scandinavia, that I listen to an awful lot. There's a couple of bands. There's one called Work of Art. There's one called Lionville, and there's one called Wet, which is actually fronted by Jeff Scott Soto. And yeah, I've been listening to a lot of that recently. So maybe that's the reason why, you know, as you've noticed, some of my music has moved away from the full-on prog. I mean, having said that, Comatose was pretty full-on prog, the album before. You know, that was originally written as a single song, you know, to run for 47 minutes. It was a concept album. Musically, it was full of twists and turns and changes and time signatures and busy bits and calm bits and full of Hammond organ and mellotron, you know, all the good prog stuff. So I try not to just repeat the next album, you know. The next album isn't necessarily a complete repeat of the last, or I try not to. So there was a little bit of that in there, I guess, you know, thinking, well, I'm not going to just write another Comatose. I'm going to do something a little bit different.
Yeah, that's kind of the reason I ask is sometimes that's what artists do. They'll just say, I just did this thing. Now I want to go and do this other thing. on the next album, and sometimes they get you in trouble with your fans, as Steven Wilson's
Well, that's
kind
the
of
thing,
finding
isn't
out.
it? Yeah. Well, the trick is not to. I guess the trick is not to move away quite so far.
Yeah.
So, without wishing to upset anybody, but being a little bit controversial here. I mean, Neil Morse, for instance. Neil Morse is an artist that I've loved for over 20 years. Fantastic singer songwriter, fantastic keyboard player, and just all round musician, as we all know. But in terms of his solo album output, he's been writing and releasing the same album over and over and over for about 20 years now. You think about all his solo albums, like the Question Mark album, Sola Scriptura, the Lifeline. They're all basically the same album again and again and again, to my ears anyway. And then of course you get people like Steven Wilson. So Steven Wilson has done the progressive rock thing with Porcupine Tree. He's done the more grander Genesis type prog thing with albums like The Raven and Hand Cannot Erase and all that. And now he's moved completely in another direction with this latest album.
Yeah.
And of course, so sometimes you get criticized for that. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to not necessarily move too far away that I write something completely off the wall and everybody doesn't like, but I also don't want to write the same album over and over and over again that sounds exactly the same. So I'm not saying that I get it right, but that's what I try to do.
Yeah. You speaking of Porcupine Tree, I detect a little bit of influence in Misguided Part 2.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. So there's a track of Porcupine Trees called Mother and Child Divided, which they wrote, or Steven Wilson wrote, around the Deadwing album. It never appeared on the album, but they've played it at concerts, and they did a live DVD from Chicago, and it's on there, so you can see it on YouTube. But there was quite a lot of tracks that they left off that album. There's another song called Half Light, which is a brilliant song. But again, it was written around the time of the Deadwing album, and it didn't get included. And I just think, why? It's great. Maybe it's because the guy writes just such great material that they're sport for choice. I don't know. Well, they used to be sport for choice. They're not really a thing anymore, are they? Porcupine Tree. But
What prompted you to write Misguided Part 2? As a lot of songs don't typically have sequels, but it's very much of a piece with the first one, from Distant Days.
Yeah, sometimes it can just be something as simple as you come up with a guitar riff and you just think, oh, that sounds. And I think that's what it was with this one. I just came up with that guitar riff and I thought, that reminds me of Misguided Part 1 on Distant Days. I thought, oh, well, okay, well this could be Misguided Part 2. And that's all. I remember I was writing an album with a couple of guys about 10 years ago, there's an album called Light from a Dying Star under the project name of Arrival. I don't know how familiar you are with that album that I was involved in. But that was purely an AOR type thing. I latched up with two guys who were massive Journey fans. And I said, yeah, I really like AOR music as well, Toto, Journey, that kind of stuff. The equivalent band here in the UK is a band called FM, and not to be confused with the Canadian FM. And I latched up with these two guys, and we ended up writing this album called Light from a Dying Star, which was more or less all kind of AOR music, but then it had like a 12-minute piece on the end, which was and when we wrote the lyrics to it, one of the guys said the song was called Light from a Dying Star, and they said, why don't we just call it Light from a Dying Star Part 1? And he says, that's a really kind of prog thing to do, isn't it? And he was kind of looking at me as if to say, that's right, isn't it? I said, oh, I don't know, whatever. So we ended up calling this song Light from a Dying Star Part 1. There's never been a Part 2. It was just called Part 1. So so yeah, that was kind of the influence for me to then go and do Misguided Part 1. And now I've done a Part 2. So who knows, there might be a Part 3 at some point.
Well, at least you didn't put out an album called Volume 3 without a Volume 2 like the Traveling Wilburys did.
Yeah, or release a film called Star Wars Part 4, A New Hope.
So one of the highlights for me is the guitar solo on Hearing the Call. What is your approach to soloing in terms of, do you write and think, okay, well, this next bit's going to be a guitar solo, or do you just play it by feel, and then if there's a solo, then great, and if there's not, then that's fine? How do you approach that?
Usually very, very highly structured. So, yeah, so it's kind of, if I'm writing, this part for a chorus, this part for a verse, then we'll have a guitar solo. What should the background to the guitar solo be? Well, it will be these chords, and we'll make it this length. It's very easy in Pro Tools because you can almost construct things like that. You construct things in blocks, so you can sort of say, well, this is going to be verse, chorus, verse. And as long as you haven't got too many time signature or tempo changes, you can normally, if you think to yourself, actually, I should have made that chorus double, you can easily lengthen or shorten things, or drop in completely new sections. So it's fairly easy to do, really. But I do tend to make sure that my music is very kind of structured. It's got a definite kind of direction to it. We're either working up to some kind of big end section, or we're going to have a busy section here, we're going to have a calm section in the middle, we're going to have a big soaring guitar solo here, and we're going to so I do sit down and actually I do think about this stuff. I guess is what I'm trying to say. But what do you mean? What about the actual solo itself? How does the actual solo itself?
Well, yeah, I mean, any insight you have, like, do you just kind of noodle and think that's a good thing, let me put a pin in this, I'll come back to this and make a solo out of it, or do you write the song for, you kind of have an idea how the chords, how the riffs are going, and then you say, okay, here, this needs a solo, and then you sit down to do the solo?
Yeah, so it's probably the latter. So you've got a definite idea of what chords you've got going on underneath your solo, and then I just tend to sit there and just throw a few notes around and see what sticks. Try and pick out a couple of nice melody lines within the solo that might sound good. Maybe try. I mean, there's a nice trick you can do. So Brian May from Queen, so he's obviously known for writing solos that have got harmonies, and some of them have got lavish orchestrations to them.
Right.
So the way that he does that is, or the way that he used to do that, was to write his solo. Then any melodic passages that he did, he would then play the harmonic third and then the harmonic fifth. So his solos, when you hear those lavish orchestrations, are always solo, harmonic third on top, harmonic fifth. I think. I'm not great on music theory, but this is what I'm led to believe. So I tend to do the same. So I won't necessarily end up using all of those parts to make a Brian May sounding solo, but I might go, yeah, I really like that melodic bit. How does it sound if I played that bit as a harmonic third? So I might play it as a third and then play it as a fifth and see which one I prefer out of all three of those. Other times I just sit there and just hit record and just go, right, okay, let's see what comes out. So it's a bit of a combination. Depends how tired I am, I guess. If I'm bursting full of energy, I'll sit there and really think about it and do the whole sort of, the Brian May approach. But if I'm feeling quite tired, I might be up against a deadline. I might have said to the record company, oh, it'll be ready by the end of September. And here we are, mid-August, and I'm still doing guitar solos. Then I might just, say, okay, I'll do something completely improvised. I'll just hit record and let's see what comes out. But I always try and make things, better than what I've done before. I always try and progress, so whether it might be to play better or to play more melodically or to play more precisely, whatever it might be, I'll always try and be better than what I've done before.
Lee, when somebody puts this album on and listens to it for the first time, all the way through, the way a proper album should be listened to, what do you hope that the listener takes away from them when they, when that CD ends and it's over with? What do you, is it a feeling, is it a message? What do you want them to remember from this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really big on messages, I don't think. I'm not one of those musicians that says, I've got something to say. That's not really what my music is about. My music is about the the thing for me is that I was always fascinated by music when I was a kid. So I used to listen to Iron Maiden, and I used to listen to Queensryche and all those bands when I was a kid, and I used to wonder how they did it, how they got those sounds, you know, how they managed to make it sound so great and sound so big, and you know, and the energy that they captured in their recordings, you know. So that's the bit that really I'm trying to recreate. So it's all about the actual audio. And I hate to say, because I know a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on the words, the lyrics and the melodies and things that the vocalists do. And of course, that's important. That's important to a good song, no question. But for me, I do really put a lot of emphasis on the way that the guitar sounds and the way that the drums and the bass sound together, and what keyboard sounds I use to knit those together to produce a kind of an audio landscape, I guess, really, if I can use that term. To you know, whatever it might be a song that makes you feel good. It might be a song that, you know, gets stuck in your head melody wise. It might be a song that gets your foot tapping, or gets you jump, you know, if you're playing live, gets you jumping up and down at a gig or whatever it might be, you know. So that I guess what I'm trying to say is it needs to invoke a feeling, I guess.
And what feeling does Harmony Synchronicity invoke for you?
Well, so I'd say that actually the end of the album. So you always, as a someone who creates albums, you always think about how the album starts and how it finishes.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like the way this album starts and finishes, to the point where, so you know, the very start of World Is Falling Down, track number 1, it starts with that blistering drum fill, and then the guitars hit you in the face. So that was a purposeful, you know, that we did that I did that on purpose. And I said to Mully when we recorded the drums, go for something really in your face to start with, and he pulled it off brilliantly, as he always does. Harmony Synchronicity, which is the last track on the album, the song builds towards the end. You'll notice if you listen to it, the last couple of choruses, it's getting bigger and bigger, and there's more orchestration going on, and it finishes on a chord that just kind of leaves it hanging. And Dream Theater do that an awful lot, and I really love that, because it kind of it doesn't resolve, but it kind of does. It's a weird thing. When you listen to it, you think, oh, that should go somewhere else, but actually no, you've left it hanging. And to me, I kind of feel good about the fact that it's left hanging like that. And like I say, Dream Theater do it all the time, and they're masters of it now. So it was a little bit of a nod to the way, not necessarily copying Dream Theater in such of, you know, doing 900-mile-an-hour guitar or keyboard solos, but it was trying to copy Dream Theater in the way that they construct songs and the way that they construct some of their endings. So yeah, I'd like people to think at the end of Harmony Synchronicity, when they think, God, the end of that ended really well.
Yeah, well, it's got
it's like having a pleasant death. Does anybody ever have a good death? I don't know.
It's terrific solo in that one as well. Do you have a favorite song on this album?
Stay, I think. Yeah, Stay. There's got Stay. When I wrote Stay, I thought that's a bit weak. That doesn't sound very good. And I sent it to Mully to do the drums, and I said to him, let me know what you think of this song, because I'm not sure it's going to go on the album. And he rang me up and he said, I'm going to use my concert tom kit for this song, because I want that Collins gated tom sound and snare sound. He said that is because it's just so Genesis, this song. It's got to have that sort of drum sound. So a few years ago, along with all the other drum kits that he's got, he went out and he created a perfect replica of Phil Collins's Seconds Out drum kit, which was obviously a concert tom kit, as Collins always uses. But the exact sizes of each of the toms and the way that it's set up and everything was just a complete replica, obviously around the other way, because Mully's not left-handed. But it's a complete replica of the Seconds Out drum kit, apparently, according to him. And he said, got to use that. And you've got, when you mix it, you've got to mix it in the same way that Collins and Hugh Padgham would have done the whole gated reverb thing. So so once Mully had recorded his drum takes, sent them through, and I'd done the mix that we both liked, and then of course Peter Jones done his fantastic vocal over the top. I just thought, do you know what? For a song that almost ended up in the trash bin, this is probably my favorite on the album.
It's funny, sometimes that just works out that way.
Yeah.
What's the best way for folks to listen to this album, to buy this album? Do you have a preferred method?
Yeah, well, no preferred method really. I completely understand people that still like physical CDs and like to buy the product, and I'm also a great fan of, you know, streaming sites as well. Apple Music, Spotify, you know, even YouTube, even the official. So the music officially is uploaded to YouTube as well, so you can even go and listen to it there. And I still earn some money from all of that. I've got no problem. This is one of the things that I wouldn't say it annoys me, but you hear some musicians saying, "Oh, I don't like streaming sites because they hardly pay you any money." Well, yeah, that's true. But the more music that you create, the more music that you release, and the more music that you upload to these streaming sites, the more there is for people to stream and listen to, the more you will earn. So, you know, I've been on a bit of a creative snowball recently, where I've released 2 albums I've released an album more or less every year since about 2016. So, you know, I've got quite a lot of stuff out there now, and all of it's on Apple Music and Spotify and all the other sites. So as a result, you know, obviously I won't talk money because you shouldn't, but, you know, I'm not disappointed by the royalties that I earn, you know, so it's good. And I don't think that people should be discouraged from using streaming sites.
Mm-hmm.
I think they should be encouraged because it will just always be there. As all the time those sites exist, the music will always be there. And what could be better than your music always being there and always being available? As a musician, that's great. You know, after I've long past this world and I'm dead and gone, my music hopefully will still be there, and that would be fantastic. So, but yeah, fully understand people that like CDs as well. So you can go to progrock.co.uk, which is the retail arm of the label that I'm signed to, and yeah, go there. And most CDs, some are selling out now, and we're not repressing because for an artist of my level, it's not really worth it, unfortunately. Which is why we ploughed all the music into the streaming sites, because they'll always be there for that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some CDs still available from progrock.co.uk, so please go ahead there and take your credit card.
And I know if you go to Spotify, you can listen to Lee singing on his first couple albums, and then you can make up your own mind about what you think of Lee's singing voice.
There are a couple of tracks with me doing lead on other albums as well. Distant Days.
Mm-hmm.
We done a re-release of Distant Days a few years ago. So because I did a self-release, it's a long story, but I did a self-release of that when it came out originally in 2014. But then F2, the label I'm signed to, they wanted to actually take it on and do it. So they asked me to put some extra tracks on the album, and we remastered it and re-released that in 2018 as an extended edition. And one of the bonus tracks is a song called All This Time, which has actually got my lead vocal on it. So there's that one. And also on Colours, which was my album in 2017. Getting back to what I was saying earlier about Mark Atkinson and the way that Mark sings in his register, I sent him a song called Broken Dreams, which is the second track on the album. And he messaged me back and said, I love this song, but I just can't sing the chorus. It's too high. So I thought, well, what shall I do? And because my demo vocal was on there, he said, your demo vocal doing the chorus sounds great. Just leave it. And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I'll sing the octave below. He said, so that's really comfortable for me. So I'll sing the chorus, just copying you, doing the octave below in the chorus. And he sent it back to me, and I mixed it all together. And I thought, do you know what? That sounds pretty good. That sounds for me, that sounds passable. So that ended up being on the album. So Broken Dreams on the album Colours, the chorus is me and Mark singing together.
There you go. So what is next, Lee? You mentioned you wrote More Than You Needed. Do we have a new album coming in 2021?
We do, yeah. It's all done. It's all written.
Nice.
It's I've not mentioned it to anyone else actually. You're the first. Oh, I mentioned it to the record company, of course, but outside the record company and my wife and Molly, you're the first person to know. So yeah, there will be a new album this year. It's all done. It's all written. So it's mostly recorded now. Actually, Molly's just got to do the drums on 2 more songs, I think. So, and then of course I got to think about singers. I haven't thought about singers yet. So we're at that stage where we've done all the music, you know, all the drums and the bass and the guitars and the keys are all done. So I've just got to think about singers now. I've got a pretty good idea of who I want to work with again. It will be mainly singers who were on Harmony Synchronicity, actually. So as long as they all say yes, of course. But, you know, we're still in lockdown here in the UK. So as long as I get material out to people within the next sort of 8 or 9 weeks, because we've not been promised that we'll come out of this current lockdown till at least early March. So, you know, we've got another 5 or 6 weeks of this. So if I get my finger out and actually get them the songs sometime in that time frame, I'm sure everybody will say yes, just because they're so bored.
And because they like doing it.
Well, you know, you'd like to think that as well.
Yeah. Do you have a target date in mind for release, or is that still kind of up in the air?
Well, do you know what? I released Comatose in September 19, and then I made big play of the fact that Harmony Synchronicity was actually ready in July 2020. So I said to the record company, look, we can either release it now or we can wait until September 20. And it's like exactly 12 months since Comatose. And they really liked that idea, so they went with that. So Harmony Synchronicity was released exactly 12 months on from Comatose. So it was September 19, September 20. So who knows? I think I might go for September 21.
There you go. Do you have a working title or an actual title?
No, haven't got that far yet. It's just a load of songs on the hard drive at the moment.
All right. Well, you know, you're in lockdown, so you have plenty of time to work on it, I guess.
God, tell me about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Lee, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. I really appreciate it, and I know
Yeah,
it's the album's going to do well for you. You know, hopefully it's another tremendous work. I think it's hopefully I didn't scare off progressive rock fans earlier. It's not as proggy as Comatose, but you know, it's still got those signature moments, those guitar solos. Still got a 12-minute song, and I think that you know, people that have been following your career, you know, for a while will you know, this will be another album that they'll enjoy, I think.
yeah. No, I hope so. I hope so. Well, you know, thanks to you as well. I mean, I'm always really grateful of all the people that, you know, do the writing of reviews and doing interviews, whether it be written or, you know, video like we've done today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because all you guys are doing it, you know, out of your love for the music as well. You know, so the fact that you take time out of your day and your life to help guys like me, you know, get our music to a wider audience, you know, I'm really grateful for that as well. You know.
We'll have this up on YouTube. We'll have the written review will go out on in the newsletter, so people can sign up for the newsletter. Just go to Substack.com, type in Michael's Record Collection, and type in your email address, and it'll come right to your mailbox. So hopefully people will do that, because it doesn't cost anything. I'm not going to spam you, and you'll get a lot of these interviews. You'll get a lot of these reviews. So. I think it fits the service. But again, thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate it. Hopefully it didn't take too much time away from your real job. I know that the time with the time difference, you're probably about close to the end of your day anyway.
Yeah, it's almost 5 o'clock here. It's always
Yep.
5 o'clock somewhere. Isn't that the song?
Right.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. It's 5 o'clock here right now.
Exactly. All right, Lee. Thanks so much, and good luck to you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Cheers.
Cheers.